All right. So we're doing the Chapman's Iliad narration test again. This time I have my windscreen for the mic, but I don't have the full setup still yet. I'm just holding the mic on a stick with a windscreen in my hand again. So there'll probably be some background noise as well, and maybe some bumps if I hit the table with this thing. But that's not the point of this. I'm just trying to get a ring of, the style of this for narration purposes. Anybody who's not familiar, Chapman's Iliad was written in the time of Shakespeare. It's sort of like a very important Iliad translation because it set the stage for what was to come later. And it's written in the sort of verse of Shakespearean style as well of that era. And the other thing to note, for anybody who doesn't read a lot of Iliad translations that, are from before 100 years ago, all of the god names and various names are the Roman versions rather than the Greek versions, which I notice a lot of people now in like reviews and stuff of different translations of the Iliad get really upset about that, which doesn't make any sense to me because that's just how they did it at the time. There's nothing you can't complain about, a piece of like a societal trend that was happening. And so that, that's just a fact of how everything was at the time. And so that's something to look out for with this. What I'm doing here is a practice of my own audiobook narration, which means with the purpose of editing in mind. When I do an audiobook, it's obviously edited. I don't know if anybody really thinks about how audiobooks get made, but you're not aiming to try and record it all without making a mistake. You're trying to record it and do different takes when needed in order to get the proper, final piece, and it all gets edited together afterwards. So I'll be doing, running back and redoing takes and stuff. But I'm not going to cut this together. I'm mostly just doing it to see if I can, again, like kind of get the style I'm going for with the narration. So we're going to do, apart from book 2, which is called the Catalogue of Ships, or that's what most people refer to it as. And in this one, as in a few translations, Chapman actually puts a title over it when it gets to the Catalogue of Ships. And what I think is really worth kind of exploring about that with Chapman's version is that whereas the book 1 stuff that I was doing last time was very conversational and not really focusing on hitting the ends of the lines, like I was talking about, sentences extend from the end of the line to the next line into the middle of that line and then go into, so you're not really supposed to be hitting the ends of the lines when you're doing the narration. With the Catalogue of Ships, it's almost like a roller coaster where it really it starts to read very fast, despite being what most people think of as kind of a boring, list. The idea of the Catalogue of Ships is that it's literally just listing the different contingents of the Achaean army and where they came from and what the characteristics of the place they came from is like and what their guys are like. But I always think that it's a very thrilling part, and it's kind of like Homer's part where he was almost doing like a guy before a boxing match, like the MC or whatever, like hyping everybody up, especially if he was performing it in one of the cities where he is, doing this, or, where one of the Catalogue of Ships characters is from. This all being, you can't prove that, but that's the way it reads to me, and that's the way I always think about it. And so I think people don't really give it a fair shot, the Catalogue of Ships, and I want to make sure I get this right. And so the way Chapman does it, it's kind of thrilling, the way that the rhyme and the meter all begin to fall at the end of the line, and it becomes very kind of fast paced compared to what we were doing last time, which was a very kind of like heavy scene driven by many characters and motivations and dialogue and stuff. So I want to jump into this. The first thing I do is I usually listen to, when I'm doing an actual narration, is I usually listen to what I did in previous sessions and try to match kind of the tone of it, so that if you can imagine, if an audiobook is 20 hours long, you don't want the tone to drift as you continue doing different recording sessions. So I'll do that. Betwixt Atrides, king of men, and Thetis, godlike son, what god gave Eris their command and oped that fighting vein? Jove's and Latona's son. Which thou continuest still, thine own prize, and slight me of mine. So you couldn't hear it, but I was listening or watching back the YouTube video I did of the previous one. Usually I would listen to the audio file. Another note about this, also, I just have the sniffles, so I'm gonna sort of, you'll probably hear me sniffling sometimes in the track here. But again, it doesn't matter because this isn't, I'm not going to use this for the book version I do. The Catalog of Ships has a lot of proper nouns. When I'm really doing an audiobook, I would actually research every single word that I'm not 100% sure about the pronunciation, and I would make a big list of the phonetic pronunciations of them, and I would make sure that each of them is right. And then when I'm editing it, I would double check them again to make sure that they're right. With this, I'm just trying to get the flow of it, so I'm not really... I'm not going to even think twice about the pronunciations of the different places and names and stuff, because that's not the point of what we're doing right now. All right, so let's jump into it. Excuse me. I don't know what's going on. Now tell me, muses, you that dwell in heavenly roofs, for you are goddesses, are present here, are wise, and all things know. We only trust the voice of fame, know nothing. Who they were, that here were captains of the Greeks, commanding princes here. The multitude exceed my song. The multitude exceed my song, though fitted to my choice 10 tongues were, heart and palates 10, a breast of brass, a voice infract and trump-like. That great work, unless the seed of Jove, the deathless muses undertake, maintains a pitch above all mortal powers. The princes then, and navy that did bring these so innumerable troops, and all their soils I sing. The catalogue of the Grecian ships and captains. Peneleus and Leotis, all that Boeotia bred, Arcesilaus, Clonius, and Prothoenor led, the inhabitants of Hyria and stony Aulida, Skene, Scoli, and hilly Etion, and holy Thespia, of Gria and of great Mycalessi of Gria and great Mycalessi that hath the ample plain, of Harma and Ilissus, and all that did remain in Erith and in Elion, in highland Petonia, in fair Ocalia, and the town well-builded Ocalia, and the town well-builded Medona, Copus, Utricis, Thisbe, that for pigeons doth surpass, of Coronea Haliot, that hath such store of grass, all these that in Plataea dwelt, that Glyssa did possess, and Hypothebes, whose well-built walls are rare and fellowless, in rich Onchestus' famous wood, to watery Neptune vowed, and Arne, where the vine trees with the vigorous bunches bowed, with them that dwelt in Medea and Nyssa most divine, all those whom utmost Antedon did wealthily confine. From all these coasts in general full 50 sail were sent, and 60 strong Boeotian youths in every burthen went, But those who in Aspledon dwelt, and Menian Orcamen, god Mars' sons did lead, Ascalaphus and Ealmen. God Mars' sons did lead, Ascalaphus and Ealmen, who in Azidan Actor's house did of Astyache come. The bashful maid, as she went up into the higher room, the war gods secretly compressed. In safe conduct these did 30 ships. In safe conduct of these did 30 hollow-bottom barks divide the wavy seas. Brave Scadius and Epistropus the Phocian captains were, Nauboldia, Iphitus' sons, all proof against any fear. With them the Cyparicians went, and bold Pythonians, men of religious Chrysa soil, and fat Daulidians, Panopeans, Anamores, and fierce Hampalists, and those that dwell where Siphisis casts up his silken mists, the men that fair Lelia held, near the Cephisian spring, all which did 40 sable barks to that designment bring. About th' entoiled Phoenician fleet had these their sail assigned, and near to the sinister wing the armed Boeotians shined. Ajax the less, Oeleus' son, the Locrians led to war, not like to Ajax Telamon, but lesser man by far. Little he was, and ever wore a breastplate made of lin, but for the manage of his lance he general praise did win. The dwellers of Caliaris, of Bessa, Opoen, the youths of Sinus, Scarphus, and Augeas, lovely men, of Tarphus and of Thronius, near flood Boagrius fall. Twice 20 martial barks of these, less Ajax sailed withal. Hold on a sec, I'm sorry about this sniffles thing. This is like annoying, but again, it's like, don't want to give any excuse to not practice something just because you are not feeling 100%. I am a big believer that like you can't let excuses stop you from, trying to do a thing that's like important to you. And since I'm not doing, this isn't a recording like for the actual audiobook, I'm not going to let that stop me. So excuse the sniffles, but hopefully you'll forgive me. Twice 20 martial barks of these, less Ajax sailed withal, who near Euboea's blessed soil their habitations lad. Sailed withal, who near Euboea's blessed soil their habitations had, strength-breathing Abants, who their seats in sweet Euboea made. The Histians, rich in grapes, the men of Calcada, the Serents, bordering on the sea, of rich Eretria, of Dion's highly seated town, Charistus, and of Styre, all these the Duke Alphenor led, a flame of Mars's fire, surnamed Chalcontiades, the mighty Abant's guide, swift men of foot, whose broad-set backs their trailing hair did hide, well seen in fight, and soon could pierce with far-extended darts the breastplates of their enemies, and reach their dearest hearts. 40 black men of war did sail in Alphenor's charge. The soldiers that in Athens dwelt, a city builded large, the people of Eurystheus, whom Jove-sprung Pallas fed, and plenteous feeding Tellus brought out of her flowery bed. Him Pallas placed in her rich fane, and every ended year of bulls and lambs the Athenians please him with offerings there. Mighty Menesthius, Petius' son, had their divided care. For horsemen and for targeteers, none could with him compare. Nor put them into better place, or hurt, or to defend. But Nestor, for elder he was, with him did sole contend. With him came 50 sable sail, and out of Salamine. But Nestor, for elder he was, with him did sole contend. With him came 50 sable sail. And out of Salamine, great Ajax brought 12 sail, and with the Athenians did combine. Who did in fruitful Argos dwell, or strong Tirinthia keep? Hermion, or in Asinen, whose bosom is so deep? Trizina, Ian, Epidar, where Bacchus crowns his head. Aegina and Meseta's soil did follow Diomed. And Sthenelus, the dear-loved son of famous Capaneus, together with Euryalus, heir of Mecistius, the king of Talionides, past whom in deeds of war the famous soldier Diomed of all was held by far. 80 black ships did follow these. The men fair Mycenae held, the wealthy Corinth, Cleon for that beauteous sight excelled. Erythrae's lovely See, it's hard to catch these parts where, this is ending Diomedes' contingent. This is starting Agamemnon's Mycenaean contingent. And I have to come up with some way to do the rhythm of this without entirely breaking it, but also break it enough so that you, the reader, can tell that it's ending one thought and starting another. The famous soldier Diomed of all was held by far. 80 black ships did follow these. The men fair Mycenae held, the wealthy Corinth, Cleon, that for beauteous sight excelled, Erythrae's lovely seat, and in Ornia's plain, and Siconia, where at first did King Adrastus reign. High-seated Gonoessa's towers and Hyperisis, that dwelt in fruitful Pelinon and in divine Aegeus, with all the seaside borderers and with wide Helice's friends, to Agamemnon every town in her native birth commends, in double 50 sable barks. With him a world of men, most strong and full of valor went, and he in triumph then put on his most resplendent arms, since he did overshine the whole heroic host of Greece in power of that design. Who in Lacedaemon's rule the unmeasured concave hold, high Pharis, Sparta, Messe's towers, for doves so much extolled, Brescia's and Augea's grounds, strong La, Otilion, Amyclus, Halos harbor that Neptune beats upon. All these did Menelaus lead, his brother that in cries of war famous. All these did Menelaus lead, his brother that in cries of war was famous. 60 ships conveyed these enemies to Troy in chief, because their king was chiefly injured there in Helen's rape, and did his best to make them buy it dear. Who dwelt in Pylos' sandy soil, and Arene the fair, in Thyron near Alpheus flood, and Epi full of air, in Separicius, Amphigen, and little Ptilion, the town where all the Iliads dwelt, and famous Dorion, where all the muses opposite in strife of poesy, to ancient Thymeris of Thrace did use him cruelly. He coming from Eurytus' court, the wise Icalian king, because he proudly durst affirm he could more sweetly sing than that Pyrrhian race of Jove, who, angry with his vaunt, bereft his eyesight, and his song, that did the ear enchant, and of his skill to touch the harp disfurnished his hand. All these in 90 hollow keels grave Nestor did command. The richly blessed inhabitants of the Arcadian land, below Selene's mount, that by Aepetus' tomb did stand, where dwelt the bold near-fighting men who in Phanis live, and Orchomen, where flocks of sheep the shepherds clustering driv, in Rhipae and in Stratiae, the fair Mantinean town, and strong Inispe, for height is ever weather-blown, Tegea and in Stymphalus, Parasia strongly walled, all these Alcaeus' son to field King Agapenor called. In 60 barks he brought them on, and every bark well manned with fierce Arcadians, skilled to use the utmost of a band. King Agamemnon on these men did well-built ships bestow, to pass the gulfy purple sea that did no sea rights know. They who in Hermon, Buphrassus, and Elis did remain, what Olen's cliffs, Alysius, and Myrasin did contain, were led to war by 2 dukes, and each 10 ships did bring, which many venturous Epeans did serve for burthening. Beneath Amphimachus' charge, and valiant Thalpius, son of Eurytus, Actor one, the other Stietis, the other Ctietus. Diaries Amerincides the other did employ, the 4th divine Polyxenus, Agasthenes' joy. The king of fair Angiades, who from Dulichius came, and from Echinius' sweet isles, who hold their holy frame by ample Elis region, Meges Phylides led, whom Duke Phyleus Jove's beloved begat, and whom fled to large Dulichius for the wrath that fired his father's breast. Twice 20 ships with ebon sails were in his charge addressed. I'm assuming this is a typo. Maybe it's an antiquated word, Whilom, Willem. I'm assuming he's saying and whom fled, because he fled to Dulichian. Anyway, were in his charge addressed. The warlike men of Cephaly, and those of Ithaca, woody Neritus, and men of wet Crocylia, sharp Aglipa, Samos Isle, Zacynthus sea enclosed, Epirus, and the men that hold the continent opposed, all these did wide Ulysses leave. All these did wise Ulysses lead, in council peer to Jove. 12 ships he brought, which in their course vermilion sterns did move. Thoas, Andrymon's well-spoke son, did guide the Aetolians well, those that in Pleuron, Olenon, and strong Pylene dwell. Great Calchas, that by seaside stands, and stony Calydon, for now no more of Aeneas' son survived, they all were gone. No more his royal self did live, no more his noble son, the golden Meleagor now. It's a weird way to pronounce Meleager. No more his noble son, the golden Meleager now, their glasses all were run. All things were left to him in charge, the Aetolians' chief he was, and 40 ships to Trojan wars the seas with him did pass. The royal soldier Idamen did lead the Cretans stout, the men of Knossos and the town Gortyna walled about, of Lyctus and Miletus towers, of white Lycastus state, of Fastus and of Retius, the cities fortunate, and all the rest inhabiting the 100 towns of Crete, whom warlike Idamen did lead, co-partner in the fleet, with men. Whom warlike Idamen did lead, co-partner in the fleet, with Kilman Merion. 80 ships with them did Troy invade. I assume this was also a typo. I've never seen it, at least, is that Knossos would be written as Gnossos. I think that's a typo. It's supposed to be a C, but it's a G instead. At least that's the way I'm doing it. Yeah, it's interesting sometimes with like the ethics of when you're narrating an audiobook, where should you be doing it just like exactly as on the page, and sometimes if it totally doesn't make sense, like if you're sure that it's a mistake, at least for me, I will do it the way I think it's supposed to be. 80 ships with them did Troy invade. Tlepolemus, Heraclides, right strong and bigly made, brought 9 ships of war from Rhodes, which haughty Rhodians manned, who dwelt in 3 dissevered parts of that most pleasant land, which Lindus and Gelassus were, and bright Camirus called. Tlepolemus commanded these in battle unappalled, whom fair Astyache brought forth by force of Hercules, let out of Ephyre with his hand from river Selleis. When many towns of princely youths he levelled with the ground, Tlepolem in his father's house, for building much renowned, brought up to headstrong state of youth, his mother's brother slew, the flower of arms Lysimnius, that somewhat aged grew. Then straight he gathered him a fleet, assembling bands of men, and fled by sea to shun the threats that were denounced then by other sons and nephews of the Alcidon fortitude. He in his exile came to Rhodes, driven with tempests rude. The Rhodians were distinct in tribes, and great with Jove did stand, the king of men and gods, who gave much treasure to their land. Nireus out of Sima's haven 3 well-built barks did bring. Nireus, fair Aglaea's son, and Carapes the king. Nireus was the fairest man that fair to Ilion. Nireus was the fairest man that to fair Ilion came of all the Greeks, save Peleus' son, who passed for general frame. But weak this was, not fit for war, and therefore few did guide. Who in Cassus, Nicerus, and Crapathus abide, in Eurypylus town, and in Calydnus soils. Phidippus and bold Antiphus did guide to Trojan toils the sons of crowned Thessalus, derived from Hercules, who went with 30 hollow ships, well ordered to the seas. Now will I sing the sackful troops Pelasgian Argus held, that in deep Alus Alope and soft Trachina dwelled, in Phthia and in Helide, where live the lovely dames, the Myrmidons, Hellenians, and Archives robbed the frame. Who live the lovely dames, the Myrmidons, Hellenians, and Archives robbed of fames, all which the great Aeacides in 50 ships did lead. For these forgat war's horrid voice, because they lacked their head, that would have brought them bravely forth, but now at fleet did lie, that wind-like user of his feet, that would have brought them bravely forth, but now at fleet did lie, that wind-like user of his feet, fair Thetis progeny, wrought fair Usually I don't like to force the rhyme like that for lie and progeny to make it progeny, but I'll do it for this. Now at fleet did lie that wind-like user of his feet, fair Thetis progeny. Wroth for bright-cheeked Briseis' loss, who from Lyrnessus spoils, his own exploit he brought away as trophy of his toils. When that town was depopulate, he sunk the Theban towers. Myneta and Epistrophus he sent to Pluto's bowers, who came of King Evenus' race, great Helipiades. Yet now he idly lives enraged, but soon must leave his ease. All right, not bad. So, as you can see that, as opposed to the previous episode of this, I'll move the wind screen for now, just so I can talk right into the thing. Compared to the previous episode, you can see that it's hitting almost the end of every single line is the end of the beat and the end of the thought, where it's either a comma or a period or some kind of punctuation. Very few like this. Usually after the kind of descriptive passage about the town is it, doing one of these like longer winded sentences that extend past the line. And it gives it a really interesting like roller coaster effect that I was describing earlier, where it's like the catalog of ships in Chapman's Iliad reads really sort of exciting and fast because the meter is like let loose and everything hits the beat. So I wanted to try that. I think there's some parts that I would do differently. As you can probably tell, there's also a lot of kind of like hidden meaning in a lot of these things, which it helps that I've read the Iliad like 30 times in different translations at this point. So I know who they're talking about. But even when they're talking about Achilles later here, this part that we just did, I don't think they ever say Achilles. Yeah, he never says Achilles in this entire part where he's talking about Achilles and the Myrmidons. He says Myrmidons once, but he's referring to him as Peleus' son or Thetis' progeny and stuff. And as the narrator, I have to know ahead of time who I'm talking about and what I should be infusing into that section. Another reason why I want to do a narration of this is because especially a lot of rhyming verse translation narrations of the Iliad, but also any narration of the Iliad, a lot of times, even if they get like a celebrity to do it, a lot of times you can tell that they haven't read it enough times to really truly understand what they're talking about in various parts. And so there will be parts where they treat like epithets as if they're a different character than just calling the person by their name. Like if they're talking about Hercules or Heracles, and then there's a different part where it's like Amphitrion's son or whatever, or Alcmene's son, and it's in the same sentence, you can tell that the intonation they're using is that they thought that was a different character than Heracles, where Homer, Amphitrion's son is Heracles, so that he's talking about the same guy. And so for me, it's really important to infuse the correct emotion and like emphasis onto these to make it easier on the reader to understand what they're supposed to be thinking and who is being talked about. Because as I'm sure you've noticed by listening to this, it's very hard to parse if you don't know the story already, and if you don't know who these characters are. This is kind of like it, in pop culture terms, it's like Marvel's The Avengers of, the Greek heroic age, where all the major heroes of stories are together in one thing and everybody knows who they are. And so we don't necessarily know them if we haven't read the Iliad before, but everybody who came to a performance of this knew who it was. And it's like, think of in one of those movies where it's like Captain America shows up and everybody's excited, like in the part where he calls out the contingent of, Ajax or something, everybody's pumped. And I think it's a shame that a lot of narrations especially of the catalog of ships, treat it like a sort of rote list that's like there's nothing to be gained from it. You just kind of have to get through it, where there's no like emotion or excitement infused into it. And I hope that or at least what I'm shooting for, what I would like to be able to do is make it more exciting of a moment for people who know who these characters are. If you don't know who the characters are, hopefully it would teach you about them, but it would probably be somewhat, indecipherable either way. So at least then in that case, in the case that you didn't know who the characters are, it would hopefully at least just be kind of like nice to listen to or whatever, I think that the Chapman translation I would rate as one that's like to be read after you've already grown accustomed to the Iliad. Like it's not a beginner level translation. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's the same with anything. Some things are not meant to be beginner level things. But anyway, I think that went pretty well. I just steamrolled over all the pronunciations for things, so I would obviously be double checking all the pronunciations of the various places, but they all went relatively smoothly. And yeah, I'm interested to keep going with these. I would like to do one next of maybe of a battle scene, like book 5 or something, where now you're getting into a different type of moment where you're trying to get these exciting battle moments within the this rhyming scheme that Chapman used. So we'll see about that. But for now, I think this is good, and we'll keep going with the practice on this.